Hey, good morning, everyone. It's Rebecca Undum, and you are watching Rebecca Undum Live, our weekly Facebook show to help you rock your rural life. And I'm Rebecca Undum, founder of Groove School and author of How Mommy Got Her Groove Back. So today on the show, we are talking about the second type of person. So this is a 5-part series on people. And I have, in my mind anyway, 5 types of people that we ought to avoid. And today we're talking about the specific type number 2, which are blamers. Blamers. It's not good. So before we get into that topic, as you guys are joining, please say, hey, good morning, because I always love to know who's joining me. And every single week on Rebecca Undum Live, and you know how long I do this, I have no idea. Good morning, Danny. But for now, on every single show, I give a book away for free, a physical book. I sign it and I send it to you. And basically, it's based on whatever we're talking about that day. Typically, it tends to be like share what you're going to do or share what you have done or just share something and you get your name in the drawing. So this week's book giveaway goes to Michelle Jabs Milky. And so, Michelle, I'll tag you in the comments here when the post is over. And all you got to do is PM me your address and I will send you a book. And I always say a lot of the women that are on these calls with me, they've read the book already, which is great. But what a fun way to gift somebody some groove, right? Find a friend, think of a friend, and send it their way. Okay? So good morning, Christy. So today we're talking about blamers. And so last week, I'll just every time that we start a new piece of the series, I'll be sure to kind of recap a little bit. Last week we talked about the victim, and the victim is the person that's always like, you know, why is this happening to me? You know, as if nobody else ever struggles with anything. Today we are talking about blamers, and blamers are, they can certainly take on a victim mentality. I would say that it's pretty consistent, but the biggest difference here is that they're always looking for somebody else to pin their situation on. So they're asking who dropped the ball, who was responsible, and very much like pointing everywhere outside of themselves, right? Because it couldn't ever be their issue. And so it's a challenge because there's a lot of reasons. Like when I research additional thoughts about these things, when I bring this stuff to you, psychologically, there are reasons why people choose to blame. And a lot of times it's deflection. A lot of times it's deflection of their own securities or insecurities. They're uncomfortable about something with themselves. And so pushing the blame out, looking for somebody else to pin it on, takes the heat off of them, so to speak, right? I don't really care what the reason is. Like, I don't know that diagnosing the reason's all that helpful. I think so a couple things. I'm coming to you with these things because if you recognize yourself in some of this, then absolutely we need to take steps to try and eliminate or lessen that effect on other people. It's crappy. Blaming is a crappy way to be. Secondly, if you're working with people or you know people that are like this in your life, I want to try to give you some practical ideas that you can take to them to help them work through their stuff. Because especially if it's the type of person you can't get away from. You know, if you have to work with this person, blaming can be really hard because if you're working with a blamer, there's probably a decent chance that you're going to get their finger pointed at you at some point. So what do we do? How do we work through it? And then thirdly, every single time we talk about things related to people, which that's mostly what I talk about in the work that I do, I think about kids and the fact that I'm raising them, and it can be so damn frustrating. I think I mentioned last week on the show that my middle child has like this very typical middle child thing where it's either his older brother's fault because, you know, he's older and everything is cooler and he gets all the stuff, or it's his younger sister's fault because, you know, she's younger and she demands more attention. And so he's really wired to blame. Okay. So I always want to give you some ideas so I can help you, hopefully. And all you got to do is try one, you know, pick one thing and try it. Okay, so I thought initially it'd be helpful too. I've got a problem occasionally with blaming, and it's just a shitty attitude. It's kind of what it comes down to. But I find myself my journey to trying to be healthy and strong and, in check nutritionally. It is so easy for me to blame my spouse, okay, when things aren't going well, because my spouse, hey, Judy, my spouse isn't on that journey with me. Now, granted, would it be like worlds easier if he were? Sure. But because, so like this whole thing where they're like, get rid of all the junk food in your pantry. I'm not the only one that buys food. Occasionally my husband brings crap food home, right? So right away I'm set up for this situation where I very easily could say, well, I would be doing so much better if my husband were just not bringing that stuff into my house. Well, that's just a more subtle version of blaming. It really isn't any different. So this is really about how do we look at the things that are happening to us or the situations that are coming about where other people are involved. And instead of focusing on who's to blame and who is responsible, looking at solutions, okay? So the other thing I was thinking about where I really tend to get blamey is when other people are truly awful to me. And it happens, right? Or they're just cranky, or you have a bad encounter with somebody. Like maybe you were treated poorly by somebody that was actually serving you, which is crazy to think that would happen, but it does. And then I walk away with kind of a bitchy, cranky attitude. And I literally am like, well, that other person was a jerk. It's their fault, right? That's a blaming mentality. And so I wanted to kind of bring that like softer nuance into it because this creeps in so easily. And what we're trying to do is say, how do I own me in this situation and think about what do we do to make it better instead of who's at fault? Because at the end of the day, it often doesn't freaking matter who is at fault. It just matters what are we going to do to fix it if it's a problem, right? Okay, so here are I've got 4 ideas for you here. And again, I made notes so I stay on task for you. So again, if you're dealing with somebody that is in that blaming kind of mentality, or if they're blaming you, this was a phrase that I started out with last week because I think it's kind of a soft way to, because we never want to be that person that's just giving everybody advice because we're so smart, right? So it's about saying, when I find myself in a situation like this and I feel hurt by somebody or I feel like somebody else is at fault, here's some things that I try, right? And you pick one. You don't have to hit all of them on this, but you want to try at least one at a time. The first thing is, and again, if you're the person too, so this blaming mentality, we have to believe that there is a reason for why things are happening. There's a lesson to learn, and we have to determine in our minds that we're going to learn it. And so again, that's something you can share with the other person. You can say, whenever I find myself in a situation like this and I want to blame other people, sometimes I just take a step back and I ask myself, what's the lesson here? And sometimes the lesson is about people. And I'm so big on making sure that the people that we have in our life are good, honest, loving, supportive, respectful. And again, sometimes when they're coworkers, it can be a little trickier. But maybe that's the lesson. Maybe you were supposed to learn something about that other person's behavior and you were supposed to put a boundary in place. That could be a lesson. But helping yourself or another person who might be in this kind of mode of blaming everybody to take a step back and ask, what is the lesson that I can learn from this? And choose to look at it that way. There's always a lesson to learn, okay? The second thing is to always ask ourselves, what did I contribute to this situation? Because seriously, we always have a role to play, and it's so much more empowering to look at it that way and say, okay, what did I do contribute? How did I? And sometimes I know that sometimes there may be a situation where literally you had nothing to do with it and the other person was just a tried and true a-hole. Okay, like I get that that's a real thing. But we're gonna look at this next one. The third one is using the phrase, it's just 6 simple words. Let's discuss what you can control. Or if you're having this conversation with yourself, let's discuss or take a look at what I can control. Because in this situation, if it really was just somebody completely, blatantly at fault, what we get to control then is what? Our response, right? So going back to E plus R equals O, which is what was something we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and then we talked about it last week again too. When the event plus the response equals our outcome, a person can be that event. That event could be that cranky person that served us, or our husband bringing junk food home when we were trying to be healthy for the week or whatever. And we get to decide what we do about that. So the response can always be to blame them. But what good does that do? And how does that help us move forward, right? Then the fourth is to always ask ourselves, what are some possible solutions to the situation that I find myself in? So really, it's about taking back control, whether other people are at fault or not focusing on that part of it, because it doesn't do anybody any good. So as you guys are joining again, I would love to hear, like, you know, if you know somebody like this, if you can see these things helping, because it really is important especially when we're in a situation like a work deal, where a solution, like we've got to move forward as a group, or we've got to move forward as a team. If you've got somebody that is stuck in this attitude of, well, why do I have to fix it? I didn't cause the problem. That's when these situations or these ideas or strategies could be employed. Okay, so again, to recap, blaming is different from victim thinking. At least it's nuanced, right? That blaming is seriously about finding a scapegoat, or literally saying, I had nothing to do with this, therefore it's not my problem. It's always our problem if we're affected by it and impacted by it, even just in attitude. Okay, so again, to recap, here's our 4 ideas. So the first is to always believe that there's a lesson to learn, and ask yourself what that could possibly be. If you need to bring in somebody that you love and care about, that would be a great time to do that, is just to say, this happened, I feel like this person's at fault, help me see what I might be missing. Help me figure out the lesson, okay? Number 2 is to always ask ourselves, or help the other person, it depends on your role in this, if it's you or if you're counseling somebody, is what did I contribute to the situation? What role did I play in bringing this about? Or having the other person answer that for themselves. Number 3 is to use the phrase, let's discuss what we can control. Getting into the mindset of it doesn't actually matter who was at fault or who's to blame, because we can't control other people. What are we going to do to move forward productively? And then number 4 is let's talk solutions. So if we don't like the situation and we don't feel like we contributed to it, if it's a situation that needs to be rectified because it's weighing on us in some way, shape, or form, then how are we going to productively move towards a solution? Okay, so for all of you watching along, the book giveaway for this next week is literally to talk to us, you know, share with us like one of the 4 strategies that you can really see working with a person in your life that does this. Again, if you've got a kid that really struggles with blaming, and I'll just tell you, the one that I use with my son, I was telling you about my middle son, Carter. And again, it's largely a function of his age. He's only 6. His brother's actually a jerk. His little sister actually is whiny. I mean, that they can do this to each other, right? So the one I say to him all the time is, let's talk about what we can control. And I always say, you know, do you get to control Andrew? Nope. Do you get to control Sissy? Nope. So what can you do, buddy? And then we talk about solutions. You know, what can you do so that you're not so frazzled and angry all the time? So just share in the comments. And again, if you guys who watch this on replay, share in the comments about a person. Again, you don't name names, like that's crazy. But if you've got a person that's like this, or one of the 4 strategies that you can really see yourself using, and if it's you, great, okay? And then you'll get your name in the drawing for the book giveaway for next week. As always, the giveaway that I do on every Facebook Live show is my Groove Finders Guide workbook. And so I will put the link to that in the comments. Yeah, so again, like this is all about the 5 types of people we need to avoid. We should avoid blamers at all costs, because again, at some point they'll start pointing fingers at us, and that's just a crappy situation. But there are times I realize we can't avoid them. And so what do we do to productively work with them? Okay. So I hope those 4 ideas spark some, you know, hope for you if you're dealing with someone like this on a regular basis. But I look forward to hearing about what you're going to put into practice this week. As always, until we see each other again, groove on. And I love you all, and I will talk to you soon, okay? Have a great day and a great week, everybody.